this week's video, I'll demonstrate the 3-row buttonhole. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. 3-row buttonhole is a version of a yarn over buttonhole, but it spans 3 rows, so it's more elongated and allows for a larger button than a standard yarn over buttonhole, such as this. So here's the standard one, and here's the 3-row buttonhole. So the first thing you might want to do is mark the location where you want your buttonhole. So in this case, I want to place the buttonhole in this purl column here. So I'm just going to place a locking stitch marker. So this is a vertical buttonhole. So this buttonhole is knit in the same direction that the garment was knit and will be attached in some way at the edge, either by being sewn on or by being attached as it's being knit. But in either case, it's a vertical buttonhole, a button band. This is a horizontal button band. Now I've used a variety of different stitch patterns to knit it, but this is the sort of button band that is knit perpendicularly to the actual sweater body. So the sweater body would be knit in this direction, and then the buttonhole band would be picked up along the edge all at once, and then it would be knit this way. In this sort of situation, you would be working multiple buttonholes across the same row, and you would want to mark their location at each place so that as you knit across, maintaining your stitch pattern, you would know when it was time to work a buttonhole. So there are 2 versions of this 3-hole buttonhole. I'm going to show each one. The difference is in which kind of decrease you use. So the result isn't any different. It's just mostly a matter of preference. So I'll show each one and then you can decide which one you like best. I'm going to knit across my established ribbing pattern until I get 1 stitch before the marked column. So I'm going to stop when I've finished working this purl stitch, ready to work that knit stitch. Okay, so now I am 1 stitch before that purl column. I'm going to work a decrease. I'm going to work a left leaning decrease so that this knit stitch ends up on top. So I'm going to decrease these 2 stitches together and the knit stitch will end up on top. So I'm going to use an SSK decrease. So you slip each stitch as if you were knitting it. That changes the stitch mount. Then you enter the 2 stitches through the front. So now you're in position to knit these 2 together. So now we have eliminated that purl stitch by decreasing it out. Now we're going to do a double yarn over. So if you hold the yarn in your left hand like this, you just create 2 loops around the needle. If you hold the yarn in your right hand, then it's going to be just like you were knitting a stitch, only the needle isn't through stitch. So you've created 2 loops right here. And at this point, you're going to continue working the stitches as they present. So if it looks like a knit, you knit it. If it looks like a purl, you purl it. So again, you are going to be working the stitches as they present. So if it looks like a knit, you knit it. If it looks like a purl, you purl it. You do that all the way until you reach the point. Now I have these 2 just loops around the needle. So the last stitch I worked was a purl, so now I'm going to work a knit into that first loop. So I'm just going to knit it. And as it comes off the needle, I'm going to allow that other loop to come off too. So now I have this kind of really elongated loop. Don't worry about it, it'll get fixed. Continue working stitches as they present. So now we're going to work the 3rd row. Again, you're going to work stitches as they present, knit the knits, purl the purls, until you get to the buttonhole. And now we're going to knit through the buttonhole. We're actually going to purl. This stitch presents as a purl. We're going to purl it, so we move the yarn in front just like we would for any purl. But instead of entering the needle through the stitch on the needle, we're going to insert it through the hole itself. And then we work it just like any other purl stitch, wrap the yarn around and pull it through. And as we pull it through, we allow that stitch that is on the needle to come off. Nothing is going to unravel. Now you'll see you've got 2 bumps right here under the stitch. So it's a double-headed purl stitch now. And then you continue working your ribbing as before. So now we have our buttonhole. On the back side, you can see that we have kind of these elongated loops on either side of the stitch, but that knitting through the buttonhole helped to tighten that up a bit. So this is definitely the wrong side of the fabric. Whenever you do one of these buttonholes, you want row 1 to be the right side of the buttonhole, not the wrong side. For the second version, once again, I'm going to mark the column where the buttonhole will occur. This time I'm going to work right up to that column. So now I'm at the column where I want the buttonhole to be. This time I do my double yarn over first. So I do a double yarn over, and now I'm going to decrease these 2 stitches together, but I'm going to use a right leaning decrease so that the knit column will once again be on top of the purl stitch. So I can do a regular knit 2 together. And then I can continue. Row 2 is just as with the first version. You work the stitches as they present. Knit your knits and purl your purls. And once again, when you get to the double yarn over, you work the next stitch in pattern. I just finished a purl stitch, so I would work a knit stitch into the first loop and then allow that second loop to just come off the needle. And then I would continue working in pattern. And then for row 3, I work as with the first version. I work in pattern until I get to the column where the buttonhole is. And once again, I bring the yarn, make sure the yarn's forward because this is a purl stitch, but I bring the needle through the hole to purl it and pull it out, and then I let the old stitch fall off the needle, and once again I get a double-headed purl stitch. So this is version 1 and this is version 2. They're identical. The knit columns that flank either side of the purl column where the buttonhole is maintain their stitch continuity all the way up. And because purl columns recede in ribbing, that hole is pretty well hidden in the fabric. You can see it, but it's pretty well hidden. So this is a great buttonhole to use if you need to place your buttonhole in a single column. So it can be worked in knit 1 purl 1 ribbing as I demonstrated in the vertical band, and as you can see here. Here I've got knit 2 purl 1 ribbing, and here at the end I've got knit 3 purl 1 ribbing, and it works in every one of those cases, and you maintain the continuity of the knit stitches that flank the buttonholes regardless of what the stitch pattern is. I wouldn't recommend this buttonhole in a button band where the stitch pattern is very horizontal, such as garter stitch, because it would really disrupt the garter stitch. But if you're using if your button band is made from a neutral sort of stitch pattern, there's no directionality to it, like a seed stitch or moss stitch, it could work just as well in there as well. Like all knitting techniques, this buttonhole technique may be ideal in some situations, but less desirable in others. Before knitting my buttonhole bands, I always do a swatch to see how my buttonhole choice will play out in the context of the stitch pattern of the buttonhole band, as well as how it works with the buttons I've chosen. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join me in my Ravelry group, Rocks, and there's a link to that down in the description box below. You can find an extensive array of playlists for various types of techniques on my channel, from casting on to binding off, as well as tips and techniques, finishing techniques, sock techniques, and more. If you're interested in podcast style videos, you might enjoy Casual Fridays. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, you can do that by clicking up here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.